Peace and greetings, everyone. Asif here. We'd like to take a few minutes to engage you in some reflective exercises related to inquiry and justice. Please take notes, pause if you need extended time, and think about what all this means for you in your practice as a social studies teacher. I've invited a few members of the I3 team to co-facilitate this conversation with me. We're ready, and we hope you are too. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Illinois, a future high school educator, and a member of the I3 team. If the idea of justice and inquiry scares you, you're not alone. As a new teacher, I often wonder if I can do this, but I've come to know that inquiry and justice is much closer to home than I previously thought. Maybe you'll feel the same way following this conversation. For one, we engage in inquiry all the time, sometimes without even knowing. It's part of our everyday lives. Take a baby, for example. From the moment they enter the world, they inquire. They're asking questions, collecting new information, making sense of that information, and then taking action. And what do the adults around them do? They support their free inquiries in the world, and they keep them safe, happy, and nourished. Each day, you're engaging in inquiry in your daily lives. You're asking questions, collecting information, analyzing situations, and taking action. Unfortunately, many students enter schools that remove, limit, and prohibit this sort of inquiry to action. However, and as you'll learn in future modules, this method of learning is at the core of the Illinois Standards for Social Science. These standards have no facts, no dates, no people to learn about. Rather, they are a set of skills and disciplinary concepts that we hope create inquiry to action opportunities for your students to transform their worlds to be less harmful and more equitable and inclusive. So, what is inquiry-based learning? Essentially, in inquiry-based social studies classrooms, students engage in 4 interrelated tasks. They develop questions, source information relative to those questions, analyze the data they collect through systems of power and oppression, and take action. Here at I3, we'll use our time together to push you to engage in justice-centered inquiry methods. Now, maybe more than ever, we find it critical that young people engage in inquiries relevant to a more just world. In this case, education is a pathway to the community, providing young people with space and support to locate and resolve issues they find in their lives, building upon assets and resources available to them, and creating new possibilities for themselves and others. So what does it mean to be a justice-centered and inquiry-based social studies educator? Take 30 seconds to think about a world free of oppression. What does that world look like? What does it feel like, sound like, smell like, taste like? What do you think your students think about this? Now take those speculations about the future and imagine how your social studies classroom might engage students in building this sort of world. In their article, Making Inquiry Critical, Ryan Crowley and LeGarrette King propose a critical inquiry model. They suggest that teachers and students follow 3 important guidelines to achieve these goals. Number 1, ask questions that explicitly critique systems of oppression and power. 2, collect sources that include the perspectives of marginalized and oppressed groups. And 3, develop tasks and actions that push students to take tangible moves towards alleviating injustice illuminated during their inquiries.
Hi, I'm Salka, a PhD student at University of Illinois, a researcher in social studies education, and a member of I3. To summarize what Emma has shared, inquiry-based and justice-centered social studies education positions students as a critical investigators and change makers of their world. It requires that we, as a teacher, move inward towards our own beliefs about ourselves, our students, their families, their communities, and the world. Learning to let go of our negative assumptions and our deficit notions about what students can or can't do. And learning to let go of the practices that maintain inequitable hierarchies of power and control in our classrooms. It also requires that we move outward to identify the wisdom, strengths, stories, and resources in your student lives, their families, their family lives, the community, and the world that you might use in your classroom to facilitate questioning, data collection, analysis, and action. Reaching outward to build new practices and resources that support these inquiry-based and justice-centered aims. Throughout your time here in I3 and hopefully beyond, remember to keep moving inward and outward. Next, we would like to invite you to take a moment to think about the ideas we presented. What is coming up for you? What might you do to be more inquiry-based and inclusive teacher? Please pause the video and record your reflection in a notebook.
Hi, I'm Melanie, a PhD candidate at the University of Illinois, a former elementary school literacy specialist, and a member of the I3 team. Now that you've had a chance to reflect a bit on inquiry and justice, we'd like to talk about action. Don't worry, you're going to learn a lot more about inquiry and justice in the forthcoming modules, but we find it important that you begin our series with a question in mind. A question that is open, critical, relevant, and actionable. All inquiry-based classrooms, whether facilitated by teachers or led by students, are rooted in questions. The Illinois Learning Standards for Social Science refers to these types of questions as essential questions. During your time here at I3, we'd like you to learn about inquiry-based and justice-centered social studies through professional learning methods that position you as an inquirer and actor of your own world. To support this, you'll start this series by developing an essential question to follow throughout your time in I3. During each module, you'll engage in exercises that help you move through, refine, source, analyze, and take action related to this essential question. Let's get started. To start, let's decide on what big idea your question will focus on. Take 1 minute to review your notes. Draw circles or highlight terms and keywords that you find important. Is a question related to inquiry-based and justice-centered social studies teaching coming up? Ask yourself, what do I find important? And what do I want to develop a deeper understanding of related to becoming a more inquiry-based and justice-centered social studies educator? You should have lots of ideas at this point. Now, let's turn them into an open, relevant, critical, and actionable set of questions. Take another minute to write down a big question that you have related to inquiry-based and justice-centered social studies teaching. If you're struggling to develop a question, here are a few examples. At the Social Studies Network, we've developed 4 criteria to support the development of essential questions that we'd like to share with you as you develop your own. The first criteria is open. Take a moment to review your question and ensure that it cannot be answered with a yes or no answer. If it can be, revise it to be open. You shouldn't already know the answer to your question before asking it. Open questions lead to new learnings, and as we'll get to next, action. The next criteria is actionable. Review your question and ensure that it will lead you to action. It should provoke an action rather than just being an unactionable observation. Inquiry is the motivator of change, so consider how your question could inspire an actionable movement for change. The third criteria is relevant. Ask yourself, is this a question that has meaning for me? Further, consider your question's relevance in the world and field of education. If your question is not personally or professionally relevant, revise it. Finally, a good essential question is critical. Review your question for its justice-centered ideals and aspirations. What critical change or changes might take place as a result of your question? Building from Drs. Crowley and King's research on critical inquiry, ask yourself, does this question explicitly critique systems of oppression and power? Will this question lead you towards diverse sources that include the perspectives of those typically not included? Maybe this includes your students, their families, other community members? Will this question push me to take tangible action toward dismantling injustice? And if your question isn't critical, please revise it. Now, hold on to that question throughout I3. We will use it throughout the professional learning series.
Thanks for joining us in this important dialogue. We hope that you can take these initial learnings and reflections to and through your I3 experience, returning to them as you make meaning and take action in the final months of the series. Once again, welcome to I3.
Welcome to I3.
Welcome to I3.
Welcome to I3.
We're so happy you're here.